right. Well, it's 7:01. I think we'll get started here. Hi, everyone. My name is Ron Fleming, and I'm at the sales team here at Crop Fertility Services. We've been around since 2012, and we're located in Cokato, Minnesota. We sell pellets everywhere between Canada, Missouri, Montana, and actually we just had a client out in New Jersey, so everywhere in between. We offer a variety of fertility products. If you're interested in any of it at all, please visit our website, cropfertilityservices.com. With that being said, we would thank you for joining us tonight. This is our first webinar. We hope to do many more in the future. We're having a roundtable discussion about the future of tools to help organic farmers. Not a whole lot more to say about that, but without further ado, I think we pass it on to Pete Kapustka here. He works at AgriSecure, and I think he'll have plenty to talk about that.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate that. If you want to hand the screen at some point, I'll give a quick introduction. I'm Pete Kapustka, account executive with AgriSecure. I work through the Minnesota market and areas surrounding. I grew up on a farm, farmed in the 80s after an Iowa State graduation in agribusiness. Been in agriculture in a number of different functions after getting out of farming in 1992, worked in the co-op world, worked for seed companies, worked for some startup companies. If it's in agriculture, and because of the nature of agriculture with the consolidation and technology coming in, it's likely I've had a job in those positions. I have been most recently with adjuvant nutritional companies prior to coming on board with AgriSecure, close to 3 years now. AgriSecure is a company that was founded by farmers, 5 farmers, one in particular, that looked at the opportunity organics provided and could see that the limitation was technology and paperwork don't go together. Certification requires a lot of documentation, and to scale up into what most consider a active farming operation beyond a couple hundred acres, it's almost impossible to track all the information necessary to get certification and maintain it. So the founding partner in the operation, farming close to 12,000 acres now organically, having been in the business world and worked with companies and worked with computer technology, realized we could do this in a digital format. So having done that on their farm north of Omaha, they had neighbors inquiring, and that's what launched the company. So we've been in business now. This is our third spring of operation with customers. But we are continuing refining and updating our protocols and our technology in order to meet the needs that farmers tell us they want in a product designed for certification. So Ron, if you could, let me.
Yeah, if you just hit share screen,
Yep.
you're all good to go.
Okay. So the nice thing, like I mentioned, with the technology is that with COVID especially, we're not able to get together in person as often as we used to, and going forward, it's most likely that's going to be the real world. So having designed a product that is exclusively cloud-based in managing information, we can bring it to the farmer through our website. So if you were to log into www.agrisecure.com and go to the bottom of the page, you're able to load in our product, the My Farm platform. And this is a technology and a product that we're working with CFS to offer you, the customer, as a way to better manage information going forward. If my computer will bring that up. So any customer who is active with AgriSecure, we have login information, and they're able to come into the product and access their account information. And it's important, especially with organics, because you've got to maintain the information that you have today, but also have to have up to 5 years of information readily available should there be a certification question or concern. So it's not enough just to have this year's information together. You want to have a series of years you've been in transition prior to and then actively farming. And if my signal allows me here.
Oh, while we got a little bit of downtime here, I just wanted to let everyone know if they want to have any questions answered, please put them in the chat box. and we'll kind of save them towards the end for Pete, and then I'll just ask them for you guys. All right, thank you.
Hey, Pete, as long as that's taking a second to load there, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing as far as additional grain audits with the recent fraud in the organic markets that, came out about a year and a half ago now. It seems like the certifiers are tightening up as far as what your production is and tracking that through all the way through your farm to your buyers. And maybe you want to explain a little bit on what AgriSecure can provide in that respect.
Good question. When you do enter into the organic certification, you do allow access to your records and to your farming operation for the certification agents and representatives of companies to make sure that you're in compliance. Of course, with the incidents of a couple of years ago, and there's always been a question and concern about how do we make organics truly transparent so that the end user, ultimately that consumer, has faith and confidence that the product they're spending a premium for is certified organic. There's always points of emphasis, and we see in the past, especially now, tracking grain and being able to mass balance things is something they're looking at. Those things do vary, but as you think about things going forward from where we've been the past 5 or 10 years, having good enough records has been good enough in most cases for organic customers and to be certified and then recertified. Going forward, though, there's going to be more pressure on the individual farmer to be in compliance. And I think the one thing that we excel at AgriSecure is realizing that there's a difference in being just good enough to be certified as certified organic. And then also where we bring in the AgriSecure certification model is to be better than that, having more transparency, having more information available, having a higher degree of professionalism. So in the past, maybe if you're not currently farming organically, most organic people tend to be smaller farmers, 100 or 200 acre farmers that are able to get through certification and continue on farming, even if they don't have best management or the best records. But like other things, we're going to have to show a higher level of performance in order to maintain certification. And our quest at AgriSecure is to make sure that we provide those tools so that you can know in working with us that you'll be able to not just meet the minimum threshold, but go through certification confidently knowing that your product is transparent, your certification information is documented, and that you can relay that documentation to the certification company without issue, without any kind of a problem. So as I mentioned, we do have the access of our information or your information because we don't take the information. It's your information. You provide it to us. We have the stewardship of it, but you have ownership of it. So if there's any question down the road, your data is not shared with anyone. We do, if you're interested, allow you to blindly share in order to build a database of information, because in organics, it can be kind of lonely. Not everybody shares best management practices and information. So by sharing, you're getting to see some of the group knowledge of best management practices, of things that work and things that don't. So you don't make the mistake of thinking, this sounds really good, and I think I can make it work. We'll be able to tell you if it does work and if it is a really best management practice based on other farmers who have tried the same thing. So just to bring up our technology product here, I operate a farm in Wisconsin as an organic farmer, as in addition to an account executive. I'm a customer called Red Pill Organic. And for the year 2020, I have put my information in, and you can see that this load page contains primarily financial information. One of the nice things about certification is you're going through and doing all that information on work orders, you're able to see that those things have an economic impact onto your farm. And you're able to take that certification documentation and put it into dollars and cents that you can use to better manage your farm. And I'm just going to show you a few of the functions of what we can do at AgriSecure. For a lot of people, we will go ahead and put work orders together so that you can go ahead and script out your crop year pre-season, make sure that all your passes, all your products that you plan on using are an approved product. You can email that information back and forth to AgriSecure or to CFS or to a certification company if there's a question about whether a practice or a product is compliant. So you know before you use the product, it is already an approved product and process. Apologize for the internet signal being a little weak here where I'm at. It doesn't show that on the bars of the phone, but it should load up here in a second. So we put these work orders together, and they are a script for the passes through the field based on a field by field assessment. So if you're growing corn, we put the passes in that you would likely have for growing a corn crop or a soybean crop or a wheat crop. You can adjust those throughout the year, either add passes or reduce them if they're in the script and don't actually happen. The bigger thing is, though, you have a budget in there of the item. When you actually do the event in the field, you can move that from a budget to an actual, and then that is a recorded event for certification purposes. So as we eventually get a work order pulled up, we'll be able to show you that you'll not only have a work order and a confirmed date, you'll be able to see if there is a clean out required. And by checking one of 3 boxes, meaning you are 100% organic and no clean out is required moving from field to field, or that you are a mixed operation and that for those organic acres you did provide a clean out, or that you had somebody else do the work and so there is a custom clean out order form put together, you're able to have that documented and then be able to pull that into a report. So for my farm, I had one farm called the Zentner Field, and we're going to look at the work orders for all of the year 2020, just to show you that we put the information in and it was throughout the year moved from a budget to an actual. So we do have the actual dates over here. We did have those processes with a dollar figure in there. So for combining soybeans, for example, we'll pull this up showing that we've completed a work order, that the field was harvested on the 20th, and that the clean out was a third-party representative. So instead of dragging all the paperwork, pulling out a calendar, pulling out a notebook to see those things, we're able to put this in a loaded format, and then with your smartphone, be able to log into your account with a link, and then to pull up the information and affirm, and I do this a lot as I'm leaving the field or leaving the farm for the day, those passes that were done. So it's completed at that time, and so I don't lose track of what I've done, and so when I get to certification, it becomes a lot easier. And there again, when you go to certification, there are a number of things that you want to account for and record. So in clicking on the certification, a lot of it, you have a field history plan, you've got clean out logs, you've got storage logs, you've got transactions that you can click on. I do want to show one other feature. When we talk about work orders, we're talking about the production of the crop in the field. We're going to show you how once you've got that crop in the field and harvested, how we can manage that and then be able to show the certification company that the information we're grabbing and providing is the accurate information for that field. It's a lot of point of emphasis given what's gone on in the past. So if you are a mixed operation where you're doing both conventional farming and organic farming, this will be part of your renewal process. There are some things that we like to look at going forward. Now, we do have, because this is a finished crop year, we do have the production was complete on this field. There was no storage on this farm, and we did fill a contract. And by clicking on that bar, we can identify how many bushels we delivered on a contract for 2,500 bushel, the date of start and the date of end. And then also, we're able to pull up the individual truckloads with the ID of the bill of lading, who it went to, a contract, who it was from, where it was from, the amount of bushels, the market price, and then the load number. So if you're sitting down with a certifier and wanting to go through information to mass balance your production for the year, and bear in mind, this is only one field. If you've got 5 or 6 or 8 different fields, this can be a laborious product that can take a lot of time and a lot of effort to put all this information together in one format. That's the best part about working with AgriSecure, is that we work to get this information in the system, and it's very simple to populate, so that when you get towards that certification opportunity to sit down at the kitchen table with the certifying agent, it's very consultative. It's not confrontational at all. Most of the certifications, I can't think of any certification that I've had on the farm that has lasted more than 1 hour. And I have accounts that have got over 20 fields and that are farming over 4,000 acres. The ability to have things in a digital format, the ability to email information back and forth to the customer and to the certification company means that there are no surprises, that things are logical and in their proper place. And when you start with putting things in the proper place, there's no reason to open up an extensive investigation to go any deeper into your plans. You demonstrate you're professional in grabbing all that information. So our customers feel really good about the value of the product that we bring. And at AgriSecure, we're extremely excited to be working with CFS and introducing this product to its customers. So Ron, I'll hand things back to you.
All right. Hey, thank you, Pete. Much appreciated. No questions, it looks like. So I think we'll just kind of keep on going here. I'll introduce our main panel of speakers here along with Pete. We've got Mark Keskey and Scott Niemela. They're the founders of Crop Fertility Services. They've been in organic farming for 10 years. And we got James Schroepfer. He's been an agronomist along with a farmer for 9 years. And I guess from there, you guys want to take it away?
Yeah, I mean, keep it kind of brief, but I'm Scott Niemela, and basically we started CFS as out of necessity because we were buying our pellets from long distance when we started, and we had an opportunity to get some manure that was in the same town that where we're at. So we were able to cut our input costs a lot by starting this, and I mean that was a key to being able to grow our farms as well. So pretty much everything we've done and yeah, moved on, or how we've grown from here is just kind of things out of necessity. You know, it's just solutions to the next problem, I guess. But Mark?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
As you know, I'm Mark Keskey, and yeah, me and Scott did start this business. And like Scott said, it's, you know, solving the next problem. And when we started, organics was kind of small, and it has grown, and we've ran into a lot of people that are facing a lot of the issues and had a lot of the same questions that we had starting out. And it's been really fun to, I guess, grow and meet new people and answer questions and share experiences and answer some, you know, questions that, you know, can further advance other farmers as they move forward in their journey of organic farming.
And my name is James Schroepfer. I work as an agronomist here at CFS. Was happy to join the team here in January, and really wanted to tie this back to, given I farm myself organically, tie this back to some new products, some new developments that are here as tools for us to use to improve our systems. So one of the first things we wanted to talk about was the RoGuard, you know, camera guidance system. And both Scott and Mark bought the system last year. So we wanted to just kind of show you what that can do for you and have them review of what their opinion on it was.
I guess I'll go first. You know, prior to using an Einbach or a RoGuard here, specifically to start with, I didn't see the value considering I'd never used one. It was almost nothing short of amazing here, because first cultivation, or yeah, that was what we first used it cultivating, and the corn was maybe 2 or 3 inches tall early first cultivation. And I went from being able to go, you know, 1 to 1.2 miles an hour, and I think I pretty much averaged 3.5 to 4 on first cultivation. So time savings alone, being able to make the most out of that small window of opportunity you can get, was probably one of the largest significances, I guess, to that unit. And I, you know, also might have eliminated a little bit of cultivator blight as well. So What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I guess had the same experience as you. I guess one of the big things I liked was the accuracy of the camera guidance system. It really held you on. I don't run GPS on my farm, but I have that camera guidance system, and it holds you right over the row with really accurate. And the cultivator that we're using there is an Einbach, and there's so much adjustment that you can do to that, and you can fine tune, I think, better than you can any American, my American cultivators that I own. And it just got me closer to the row. I did a way better weed control job. It was a night and day difference on our farm. It added bushels this year for me, that's for sure.
Well, I think you bring up a good point there, Mark, and that would be most people don't think of American cultivators insofar as how they fit on the farm. But when you look at most American cultivators, they really were designed to go along with a pre-emerge herbicide. And so they're not built to finesse for first pass. They're really designed to be second and third pass cultivators. So a few of the very older models, the John Deere 845 is going to have more adjustments, but as we move into the newer cultivators and you get into the internationals, the 1830s, there's not really a lot of adjustment that you have on that cultivator as far as distance of the row, depth of the shovel, and you don't have a lot of finesse with it. So particularly with these European models where they've done more mechanical tillage, more mechanical weed control, I think we're seeing the advantage of 30 plus years of focusing on that versus here in the United States, we've gotten lazy or our manufacturers got lazy from the standpoint we didn't use them. And that kind of ties in, you can see in the back of this unit here, the finger weeders, and we run those on my farm. And, trying to put some dollars and cents to all this equipment because it is relatively expensive, except when you run the dollars and cents to it, you can start to see there's real value. So on my farm where we're using the finger weeders, for example, we ran our average last 3 years with the fingers, without the finger weeders. We left in some check strips. And what I found is we were saving by running the finger weeders about $35 an acre on hand labor. So you start taking that and multiplying it by your acres, and all of a sudden there's some real dollar value to running these, in addition to the fact that it's getting more difficult to get hand labor in on a timely fashion. And if they show up late in the season, still you may still get the weeds, but how much yield have you lost up to that point? So maybe Scott, Mark, you could talk a little bit about your experience with the finger weeder this year and what your impression was of it.
Yeah, we got to use them on about 40 acres, and one key that I want to point out is, there's obviously no silver bullet in any and all of these tools. In fact, we had a guy in here yesterday from Iowa, and he was kind of asking us, well, what tool do you need? And Mark and I kind of laughed, and we said, well, all of them, because you don't know what nature is going to throw at you. And but focusing on the finger weeders here, I saw on the video a little bit ago, and it's not streaming the best here, but there was a chunk of grass that was taller than the beans that had been ripped out, and real similar to that, there was a ragweed that was about a foot tall. That's a perfect scenario that the finger weeders happen to be in the right spot. It's not going to tear out all your giant rag, but what it does do is it pushes a nice hill and buries a lot of the crop. They can hill far more in the right conditions. The ground's got to be, you can see it's pretty fluffy and flocculated here.
Yeah, apologies.
And it can move a lot of dirt in those conditions.
Well, and I think they can kind of see from this video here, which is a little choppy, but just how the finger weeders are able to tuck up the dirt underneath the crop. And there's been a lot of situations working with growers where we're running an American cultivator through, and you go, boy, I wish I just had a little more dirt that I could cover the weed. And got into a situation last year. He actually had his finger weeders up, and I said, we need to put these down. I think we're going to be able to get 100% coverage on our weeds. And on his third pass cultivating, he was able to bury even some of the 8-inch, 10-inch tall weeds that were still out there, given the shovels covered them. laid them over with the dirt, didn't completely cover them, but the finger weeders were able to kind of hill the dirt up behind and just snug it up over that weed. So I've seen an advantage both late season and early season with the finger weeders, although traditionally I think you'd think of them as being an early season weed tool. And just functionally they work differently early season, how you set them, and late season, but I think there's an application in both cases.
I did see a comment here just a second ago talking about they work great on flatland and not in hills. And we are fairly hilly. And the key was having the row guard. And I'm not saying, I don't think the row guard's right for every farm, but having that camera guidance system, especially for finger weeders, you know, let alone just a tight set cultivator, but having that camera guidance is, I would say, extremely critical, because if they can pull out weeds, they can wipe out a crop too, the finger weeders. Yeah, so that was just my observation. Was on hills they were fine, but we had a camera system to assist us on keeping us, you know, doing better than humanly possible at keeping that cultivator on the row. So.
And Mark, I would say I've seen that as well. One thing is we think about, even when we get to second and third pass, sometimes we're focused on just speed, but you know, even driving with your hands as fast as you can, maybe you can push it 5, maybe 6 miles an hour. There's been situations with the row guard that we've been able to actually go over 7, and that extra mile and a half through that extra dirt more aggressively against the weeds, and we were able to do a job that at 5 miles an hour we wouldn't have done. So so it's those little things. It's a game of inches, organic weed control. And the nice thing about the row guard is once you buy it, there's no subscription. It's not like RTK. And RTK, the basic RTK on the tractor works pretty decent on flatland, but anyone who farms hills knows that even with RTK, unless you get RTK on your planter and cultivator, you're going to have drift going up and down those hills. Here with the row guard, you take an older piece of equipment. You don't need to have any GPS system tied to it. And you can just go right over the road. So you can adapt an old tractor over. You don't need to plumb it for GPS. You don't need to buy the monitor. It really can bring you RTK, at least from the cultivating standpoint, onto the farm in a one tool package. So what's your thoughts there, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's no silver bullet. There's not a one size fits all. You know, Mark and I both farm. In fact, Mark farms a little more acres than I do. I'm fully RTK. And yeah, I mean, to what you're saying, you do have to nudge on hillsides a little bit. But actually using both the slide guide or the camera guidance and RTK, that's pretty neat. But yeah, I think Mark can elaborate on, because he's freehand driving, and I mean, for him it was a huge difference on some of his fields too. So
yeah, it was I wouldn't ever want to go without one after I used one. I've been on some pretty steep side hills, and I know that for a fact I would have taken out quite a bit of corn just freehanding, you know, on some of them steep side hills. That row guard just slid that cultivator up, and I had to keep my eyes looking forward because, you know, I was kind of concentrating pretty hard on a steep hillside. I got through the hillside, I looked back, and I didn't take out any corn, and it kind of amazed me. But that, you know, you learn to trust the machine, and, you know, it's something I think if anybody tried, they probably wouldn't want to go without it. Maybe, you know, RTK on the flat ground might work solely by itself. But I don't have RTK, so I guess I can't speak for that option.
Well, hey guys, there's a question on the chat here. How about using the finger weeders with produce, maybe smaller scale?
I mean, yeah, that's kind of half the fun of being a farmer is being innovative and finding things to make them work. I mean, you know, I actually just read something today. There's a difference between inventing and innovative. Inventing is coming up with something new. Innovating is taking something that's been around for a while and revamping it or finding a new way to use it. And I think that's, we kind of got to innovate with finger weeders. For produce, I've not grown, on a commercial scale produce, so I don't know the ins and the outs of that. But I'd be inclined to believe you could take a set of finger weeders and you find a way to mount them. Maybe it's in front of the tractor or mid mount, like our 6-row cultivator used to be. Something where you don't need to have a camera guidance system, and you could still use that on a smaller scale. Yeah, James, you look like you're going to say something.
Yep, I just wasn't sure if my mute was on or off here. No, I was going to say the finger weeders, I think you could use it in produce. Like you said, it's more of a mounting, and there you saw the yellow spider wheels on this unit. They do actually make orange, much thicker wheels in California. We don't deal with grapes up here really, but I know they're using them in grapes and things of that nature. So I'm sure there's an application for them on produce as well.
Okay, so kind of just to recap on what we were talking about with the slide guide and the row guard. I mean, I'll just throw numbers out there. The row guard is 36,000 for the mid-range, and obviously that's, I guess, one of the advantages. Once the crop's up, and it'll follow the row. It'll take whatever machine you need to, and it'll help follow exactly where it needs to go. GPS, that's, I'm on RTK, so I'm buying my second unit right now, which it's going to be putting it on the second tractor, and that's somewhere between, if I can do it on the low end, it's going to be probably 18,000, and that's if I'm buying older, more outdated technology. If you buy new technology, you can spend up to that 35 anyways. And then besides that, you're going to be paying almost $2,000 in subscription every year between RTK and the unlocks, the way they do the systems now. So I mean, every year to pay that 10 years in a row, now you're up at $15,000-$20,000 in extra expenses on that. So I mean, there's advantages. You can do blind passes, which I'm a huge fan of, weather permitting, right? You plant the field on a Monday and you harrow it Tuesday and maybe Thursday, and hopefully you get 2 or 3 passes before the crop comes up. And if the weather doesn't permit, you can get out there at different times, even if it's just kind of breaking the ground. Once you harrow it, you wipe out all your tracks. So I guess that's one of the areas that I believe that GPS has an advantage, but it's not. Every farm is unique. Every farm has its own set of challenges and its own restrictions as well. So we all have to make decisions based on what's best for our farm.
So in our field day last year, Mark, we were running that on the soybeans. How tall were they again, where that was able to follow the soybean row?
Oh, I believe they were about 3 inches. I was helped a farmer out in South Dakota set up a row guard, and we pulled into a field, and I think the beans were just out of the hook stage, and it was picking those up. So I think it's claimed that it can pick up the plants at 1 centimeter. And that's with the generation 1, that's just the color. It's using 7 different colors to find that plant. And now they have the 3D option that comes standard with all row guards. And that's an advantage. Like, if you get behind on your weed control, your corn is say 6 inches tall and you got all these small weeds coming in, and it's a pretty good mat. You can use the 3D to find that row. Sometimes you can run into a little bit of issues with the older model because the camera can't distinguish, say grasses and corn, if there's, thick mat of grass and corn, but it can, pick out that height difference. Yeah, just with the older generation, you can pick up, pretty small beans, pretty small plants. You'd be amazed. I was.
Do you find, Mark, that in the bean row that the Gen 1 on the camera guidance system that picks up soybeans at a little smaller stage than corn, just given the spacing of the plants?
I have not used that camera, the row guard system on corn that small. I was harrowing at that time. I think my corn was probably 4 inches tall, roughly, when I went out there and cultivated first. I harrowed up until that point. So I guess I don't have a actual experience with that.
I guess I'm kind of curious, given the technology of being able to do a better job of cultivating, could you take those dollars that you allocate towards that purchase of that equipment and offset them by reducing the amount of dollars spent on walkers? Is that a reasonable assumption?
That's what we did on our farm, and I ran some check strips just to put some math to those numbers and test and see. And on average, over the last 3 years, we've been saving, just with the finger weeders, not even with the row guidance, we've been saving between about $35–40 an acre in hand labor cost. And the other thing that we deal with on our farm is the timing of getting those walkers in can be difficult. So you may get them, you may get the weeds, but if those weeds have grown up to the corn is, hip high, how much yield have you lost up to that point before you get those weeds out? Versus if you can get them right from the start, right from the go, before they're really competing with the crop.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, you're looking at a double-edged sword then, because with the finger weeders, if you can get them out, you're keeping that crop at max potential for yield. And so not only are you possibly getting more income, but your weeding expenses are hopefully down as well. I mean, that's an optimistic way of looking at it, but that's kind of the way I like to look at everything. So.
Yeah. And I was going to say, you reduce the weed bank going forward too, so that's less weeds in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing I would add on our farm is we were able to eliminate a pass and a half between either a harrow and a rotary hoe on our beans. And when you look at your early season weed control and organic, being those times across the field, it's critical to get across in a timely fashion. That can be difficult to do if you've got a lot of acres. So being able to eliminate passes really adds to the bottom line, particularly when you're dealing with, like in 2019, where you had 18 hours to get your field work done before the next rainstorm came in and locked you out for another 3 days to a week, depending how much rain you got. So, so there's some other benefits, economic benefits, I think, that are hard to put necessarily a distinct value to, but on those critical years, the difference being able to get across and get all your weed control done versus trying to chase and not being able to get that extra pass and having more weed escapes, it's difficult to quantify, but it's certainly a reality.
All right, two things here quick, James. There was a question on how much are we spending on walkers. I think last year on my edible beans, I spent about $90 an acre. And that was higher than I wanted to, but it was cleaner than that in my opinion. But on the other hand, I was grateful for every one of those dollars I spent when it came to knifing and windrowing, that I'd spent that money on it. How about you, James?
On our farm on beans, for example, our last 3-year average without the finger weeders was $70 to $100 an acre. And with the finger weeders, we were able to average closer to that 35. Was about the cheapest that we ran in the last 3 years, to about 50, 55, I think, an acre.
Okay. And then kind of talking about equipment, we're spending, you know, a lot of time on the row guard, but one of the ways I kind of like to look at equipment is kind of offensive and defensive equipment. And, you know, up front, early passes, in my opinion, are the ones that count. You want to be out there hammering the field as much as you can with tine weeders, rotary hose. I mean, we get the question a lot between tine weeders and rotary hose, which one is the right one? And I mean, there again, the answer is both. What's the situation? But you know, get your early passes, your blind passes. Those are the ones, the weeds are really starting to come, you know, kind of during late May, the first 3 quarters of June, is when we see the bulk of the weeds grow. And if you can keep everything clean until then, it's definitely more of a downhill getting to the end of the year. Granted, you know, 2019 was one of those years where June just didn't even exist for getting in the fields. It was just a nightmare. But those offensive passes are going to do far more for you than a defensive pass with a weed burner and a weed zapper, which I have both. We have both of CFS has a weed zapper we do custom zapping with. But there are years we have to use them because, you know, Mother Nature just didn't quite let us do it how we wanted to. So that was just kind of my 2 cents on that, I guess.
Another question, what rotations are you guys in or recommend?
What's your local markets? That's kind of a big key. Forage is awesome. I love it, but some of my fields are harder to do forage rotations than others simply because of their distance from, you know, my main shop. But the best crop I've had was corn after alfalfa. And I guess the reason I call it as the best crop was because I tried to murder it with a weed burner after the fact. And it still went 170 bushel to the acre. And I don't know, what did I even have on there, James? 26,000 for population, 25? Was that left?
You're like 25.5 or something. You're right in between there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it could have been a lot more, but still, I mean, even when I tried to kill it, it still did very well. And so, I mean, alfalfa is one of the key ones. It really cleans up a lot of, it buys you forgiveness. It fluffs the soil up. Grass doesn't like to grow as well after it. But then I guess a typical small grain, some sort of beans and corn.
Yeah, I think, Scott, you're right.
4 to 5 year rotation, I guess I'm in.
Yeah,
What's that?
Given the amount of customers that we work with at AgriSecure, we're always asking and observing from our customers what's working well. And one of the things we keep coming back to is diversity within that rotation, trying to throw off weed cycles by having crops that mature early or that go in the ground early. And it is all dependent on your local markets to some degree or another. One of the options we do have working now with CFS and AgriSecure is that we do have an organic grain merchandiser that is available to help in those local areas determine market availability and market pricing for corn, soybeans, and then those other crops. And you certainly mentioned alfalfa. That's one of our favorites, I think, in terms of especially with transition acres. But there are markets more local, defined by dairies and goat farms that are end users. But there are some opportunities in small grains. And I'm getting excited about some of the reach back that we're getting from the industry that is purchasing organic grains. They're starting to reach back through us to get to our customers to start to produce on a boutique basis specific crops for their needs. It's still in its infancy, but I think it has a lot of potential going forward. And if you're looking at putting a rotation together and you're thinking out like you should be at least 4, 5, 6, up to 10 years, I'd leave a little room in there for an end user to come to you and produce a specific crop for a specific end use.
So just to jump in here, for example, we actually run 3 different sets of rotation on our farms, given we're looking at it not just from a fertility management standpoint, weed control standpoint, also comes in big when you're looking at your crop rotation. So when you're setting up your rotation, I think the big question needs to be markets. What do I have available to grow? But then the other question that you really need to tie into that is, what are my challenges that I need to address? Am I far away from nutrient sources where I need to put more legumes in my rotation, grow my own nitrogen? Do I have more availability to manure, where I can push maybe more of the row crops? But there the question comes in, are my weeds under control? Because then I really need to set up my rotation to control my weeds. So I don't think there's any cookbook recipe. I think the key is to be flexible, to reevaluate your rotation. Like on one of our rotations is 9 years long and the other one is 4. So depending on the soil type and the weeds that we're dealing with, you really need to just identify on your farm or seek help to help you identify what are the challenges that you're trying to match with that, in using that crop rotation as a cultural control.
One thing I would add to that, James, is a lesson I learned a long time ago from a pretty good farmer. And he talked about how farming, especially when you start looking at diversifying your rotation, and I think it applies extremely well in organics, you want to approach it the same way people approach golf or approach pool. They want to take one shot in order to make their next shot as easy as possible. So when you think about your rotation, you want to be thinking about that cropping system ahead, and what can I do to make that next cropping system as easy and profitable? There's always going to be challenges with the weather. There's going to be challenges with weeds and timing, but you don't want to put yourself in a position where you have a difficult to manage crop and you've given yourself no room for error. So to me, that weighs in a lot into what you decide to do in a rotation. If you're trying to push corn every year or corn and soybeans, you're going to be very short in the organic world because weeds and timing is going to completely devour you. If you're in it for the long run, make sure you get the diversity and rotation, that you're putting those crops in that upset the weed cycles, alfalfa being primarily among them, but rye is another good crop. Winter wheat where it can work. There are other local options, I think, beyond that. Oats is another one that we see great potential for. But you want to be thinking about, what can I do to make things as easy as possible, because problems will come in organics. And if you put yourself in a position to have things work perfectly, that's when I think things tend to fall apart.
Well, especially since in organic situations, we're really dependent upon soil health, soil structure, maintaining good tilth. Conventionally speaking, if my soil isn't got a very good granular structure, I can go put a little extra nitrogen maybe to compensate for that reduced root growth. But in organic, if you can't explore the soil profile with your plant roots, you're not going to have success. So I see a lot of trouble, guys that try corn on corn. In particular, you look at the numbers and it looks awesome, when you run your profit center. But when you take into account the fact of the additional challenges from weeds, given that second year row crop in a row, and the fact that you're going to have degraded your soil structure to a certain extent from your first year of corn, that second year is going to be a much bigger challenge. And you can do it, and producers I work with successfully do, but you better make sure you have tools then to mitigate those challenges that are going to be a natural result of the second year corn on corn.
And kind of circle back to, figuring out your rotation. People always ask me, well, what's your ideal rotation? And I always say, I don't know, ask me next year. Because you feel like one year, you know what the perfect rotation is, and maybe you have a bad experience with a crop. Maybe you learn something that, you're not going to do for next year. So it changes your rotation, different markets come available. So mine, I have a general one that it's forage. and then small grain corn and a bean of some form. So it's minimum of 4 years, subject to change without notice. So there is no right answer, but yeah, smother crops definitely help for grass control.
All right, guys. Well, it looks like we got about 9 minutes. Was there anything else we wanted to cover? Or do we want to open it up for questions?
Questions are good.
Anyone out there? If anyone wants to put
Ron,
any
is
questions-
there, can we
What?
do any voting on this? What does it do if you hit the hand button? Raise your
No,
hand.
there's no voting. That's just like if you want me to ask you, or if you want to like let me know that you want to ask me a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just thought it'd be neat to see if we could see how many people are looking at transitioning and how many people, are actively organically farming. But
I'd say throw it in the chat, guys. Yeah, this is your chance to ask anyone anything really. We got some pretty smart people here. So I use a spike tooth drag and rotary hoe for blind cultivating. When would you use tine weeder instead of these?
there is a perfect scenario for a rotary hoe, which is why we own one of those as well. But you'd use them. I mean, if the soil texture is loose and fluffy, it's gentle enough on the crop that you can get everything you need done without using a spike tooth drag. Thoughts, James and Mark?
I would say, I mean, you're going to use that tine weeder at the same time you would, your spike tooth drag or your rotary hoe. Like you said, it depends on your soil conditions. If you end up with a little crust on top from some heavy rains, you might need to run through and break that up with the rotary hoe first, and then come back with your tine weeder immediately after and hit that field again. And that we do that a lot because you just get better coverage when you're, pulling a tine weeder versus a rotary hoe. Rotary hoe does a good job, but that tine weeder does even a better job.
I would just add in there for guys that have run with rotary hoe and a long tine weeder. Again, there are situations where you do have to run with the rotary hoe, but I would say the advantage of the tine weeder, like you said, Mark, is if you run both implements, even in ideal conditions, the rotary hoe is never 100% of the profile as far as dirt disturbance along the top. And what a harrow does is it tills everything. So if I have a preference, I will always run a harrow in place of a rotary hoe.
All right, fantastic, guys. Got another question here. They're interested in planting flax for the first time. Any advice?
Don't ask me. That's my advice. I have no idea. Ron, if you talk to anybody from Canada, I guess you could see if they've done it up there and maybe connect them. If you have any of our customers that are from Canada that grow it.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing anybody on the chat right now that we maybe could ask, but yeah, it's certainly if you just want to send your information to Ron at cropfertilityservices.com, I can see what I can figure out for you.
One thing I would recommend about that, from what I've heard about flax, it's hard to get a tight canopy, so weed issues can be an issue. If you have a field that has weed pressure, flax may not be a great crop to rotate to. And then, like all the grains that are not the mainstream, I'd certainly want to have a market plan in place ahead of time for those units, and also a plan if units that you're producing don't quite make it a spec. There's been interest in specialty crops, and one of the things we've come across is you need to have a plan B in case for some reason you don't make a test weight or you don't make a quality or purity component. You need to have a second place in order to move that crop in order to dump it into the market and get whatever you can. So there is more risk with those kind of crops. There's also great rewards if you've got a good contract with an end user and the situation where you can grow that profitably.
Worked with flax just a little bit, and I would say it is a weed control challenge. Just be prepared. Closer row spacing is going to be your friend. It does not canopy, shade out weeds very well. I have yet to have had a really pretty looking flax crop at the end of the year. There are always going to be some weeds, and that's something you have to consider putting into your rotation, is that next year following it, you're going to have more weed challenges. So from a rotational standpoint, I would plant a crop then that would be easier on your weed control following that next year, knowing that you're going to have a little bit more of a weed seed bank to contend with.
All right, I think one of our attendees here, Louis, he mentioned have a clean field. It's pretty hard to carbine. Our combine has a deep root, so it can handle dry weather. Could stand slow germination. So I think another question here, any prediction on organic corn prices this year? Will it reach $8 in Iowa?
Currently right now, I know of some grain that's moving off the farm in March for $7.90. I'm no market expert by any stretch, just relaying some of the things that I'm hearing and some of the things that we're seeing. I think it's going to follow a lot of the volatility in the conventional market, meaning we don't have an idea yet of how many acres are going to get planted. COVID around the world has disrupted exports to the United States. The low dollar has changed the dynamic. So there's a lot of moving parts. I think the bigger thing I hope people understand is that the opportunity may or may not be there. It's important, though, to have a marketing plan and a marketing approach, and maybe somebody dispassionate about your farming operation to help walk you through those possible scenarios on your farm. I'm in the situation where I'm looking at growing either soybeans on soybeans or corn following soybeans on the farm that I farm in Wisconsin. The market dynamics in the East are a little bit different than the West. Soybeans tend to have a better premium versus corn, partially due to the exports coming into the East Coast are typically corn. Those coming into the West Coast more typically are soybeans. Who knows where the market price ends up? So like any good market analyst, I'm going to leave things to you to make your own decision.
All right. Anything else we want to go, or do we got enough time for maybe one or two more questions?
I guess to follow up on flax, basically Dima Gwitch from Saskatchewan said he's growing flax there as an intercrop with wheat. It grew good, but it was hard to separate, and it said by itself it will not outcompete the weeds. So kind of going with what we're saying. And obviously everybody farms a little differently, so some people might have success in some different areas or different methods, but
I would just circle back to that, the $8 in Iowa, and that would be, when you run your budgets this spring, I would run on current market prices, and I would run with a conservative bushel as far as end of the year harvest. Part of farming is risk management and dealing with the markets. And, there's on the conventional side, guys that are making money at $3.25 corn, and you do that through management and risk management. So I think we can't get hung up exactly on where the price will be necessarily. I think it's a challenge for us then to retool back to our farm, track our numbers better. Where are we spending money and managing that side of it as well. I think we got to look bigger than just what's the end bushel price at the end of the day.
I think one thing I'm seeing too is people are getting excited about this conventional market and where it's moving. That people are thinking that transitioning to organics is maybe not the right thing to do. If you look back throughout history, though, when we have seen the conventional market move into areas of profitability, those have cannibalized poor managed acres of the organics, so that within a couple of years, you tend to have a very wide spread between conventional and organic farming. So when somebody right now is on the fence about whether to transition acres into organic, I'd like them to think about a couple things. First of all, alfalfa is a great transition crop. And if farmers are taking those acres of alfalfa out and putting in corn, that's only going to reduce the supply of conventional alfalfa or transition alfalfa in this case. So that in and of itself may be a reason to go in. If you currently have CRP ground coming out, if you can produce an affidavit, that could go right into organics this first year. And there are things to do, and I'm sure James has good ideas about how to manage through that scenario. one other thing to think about, you can soft transition acres, meaning that you can go ahead and plant a crop, farm it with the conventional methods without using those chemistries. And then at the end of the year, decide to pull the trigger to go into that second year of transition, or after going through the year, decide, yeah, it just isn't for me. So I think the idea is to look at all the options that are out there, stay flexible and stay open. And I think now as we're starting to see that establishment of crop insurance strike prices and the budget numbers are starting to come together and we're going to get closer to spring, it may be good to call an audible on some of the acres that profile well for organics in the long term.
All right. Do we want to do one more?
Sure.
All right. Inoculated biochar as a soil amendment. Have any experience?
I do not have any.
Past with product from Calcium Products. I was a rep for them for a few years. The humic materials, and I believe the biochar is a humic product. It is going to help, I think, especially in low CEC soils where you can get more nutrient attachment sites and help that soil biology and soil tilth. My experience, though, is that's where it really performs best. And as you move into higher organic or richer soils, you seem to lose some of that advantage. So keeping on those single digits or those sandier soils tend to see the best return on investment. I don't know, James, is that similar to what you're seeing?
I think, like you said, it's important to remember where biochar was first developed. It was developed in the Amazon, partly because of their low CEC or actually anionic soils. They can't hold cations. So it really, when you think of even biochar, it's different than your humic products because humic products are going to have more available carbon that breaks down readily. Biochar is really a slow breaking down organic matter that is designed to essentially be organic matter, so provide structure, help with flocculation, hold nutrients, but it's not if you're looking at it from a carbon source as far as feeding microbes in your soil, it's not going to do much feeding because it is a very, very lignified complex carbons that you're adding into that system. So I would just, it'd be important to look at how what you're looking, identify why you're going to put it on your field. If you're going to put it because you want water retention, you're looking to improve structure, those would be aspects maybe to look at biochar. But if you're looking at it from a biological standpoint, as far as feeding the microbes, it's not a simple carbon structure. It won't break down readily. It won't be food for those critters.
All right. Well, I've got some more questions here, but it's about 8:03.
There was one comment that I would like to answer about. This is our experience with tine weeder. High residue, we tend to go with rotary hoe tine weeder in the very low residue fields. Absolutely. You do have to plan your rotation, and that's part of the whole. When we talk about rotations, that's one of the things. What's your primary tillage look like after corn? Because if you have an excessive amount of corn, residue left on the surface, there is a good chance you can plug up depending upon how much and how fine the residue was when you left it.
I normally start thinking about where I'm going to run my tine weeder in the end of September because I know I have to have good fall tillage to get rid of that trash. So it doesn't turn into a dump rake. All harrows turn into a dump rake. I don't know one that doesn't when you get into a heavy trash field. But yeah, I just wanted to add that. I start thinking about where I'm running my harrow already in end of September.
Yeah. Yep. Lot of forethought, probably too much actually, but then again, it's not enough when you're in the moment and you're plugging up. So, so let's see. We got a couple more questions, and let's see. Corey's asking. He said he's 5,000 acres, conventional. What kind of extra manpower would I be looking to accomplish? Simple answer is a lot. But it takes, and like Pete, this is going to be to where you really fall in. It's going to be a lot more paperwork, a lot more documentation. It's going to be a lot more passes across the field. Mark, how many passes did you make across your cornfield this year?
From when I started to my last pass on the fall tillage, I think it was 13 times.
Right.
So all of a sudden acres, a small amount of acres, I mean, take, 200 acres, you cover that 13 times. That's all of a sudden, what, 2,000 acres, or better than 2,000 acres?
Yep. We actually
Yeah.
do have within that farm plan that I showed you, when you do script in your crops, we do have a grid that we can pull up and show you how many acre passes you'll be making on that field and the time of the month that you'll be doing it. So you can start to get an idea. So in May, you are starting to see how many passes with a harrow or tine weeder or rotary hoe. And we also have the ability to access information to find how many fit days for your county for field work are available. So when you start thinking about a month, you may only have 10 or 12 days. It may on the low end be as low as 8. It may on the high end be as much as 20. It may average in that 13, 14 range. But then you start thinking about, okay, if I've got 13 fit days, if I've got 8 or 12 row equipment, and I've got this many passes on this field and I've got this many fields, you start to get a feel for how much time and labor you're going to have to devote and at what times you're going to have to do that. And to me, that kind of lends itself to thinking then about rotation. If I can take that organic operation and start spreading those passes out into different times of the month, then I can do more things organically. If I'm trying to just do corn and do it continually, I'm putting everything into a very tight window and hoping everything works right. So like most good agronomy answers, the answer is it depends.
I would say on average though, just dealing with between smaller and bigger farms on the small scale side on your equipment, roughly that 250, 350 acres. And if you're going on a large scale side, I would still say you need a man for every 500 to 700 acres, depending on your size. But you look at your successful organic farms as well. And one thing they don't run, or they try not to run short of, is manpower, because you're better off doing a good job on fewer acres versus a poor job on many acres. And when you look at your manpower allocation, and if you spread it too thin, it's not that you just lost the battle for this year and lost yield potential, but all those weed seeds are going to be coming around to kick you even harder next year. So it's a downward spiral when you spread yourself too thin. As a beginner organic farmer, you're always better off running on the conservative side for your manpower rather than stretching it too thin to start with, because you hate to hit year 2 and already be in a rescue mode at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. You get put in the penalty box when you have a bad year. You notice your weed pressure increase. You definitely notice it's a bigger fight the following couple of years to get back your footings that you gave up. Yeah, I think that's kind of a summary, I guess, on it's the best non-answer I can give as far as how much manpower it would take. There's a lot of thoughts that go into it, and honestly, I believe this is kind of where AgriSecure could really help take a 5,000 acre operation and help them have a successful transition. And then Dean McGuish, he's asking what are we seeing for gains in cereal crops using manure pellets? And Dean, you, I believe, are in Canada, and I know down here, or Saskatchewan, okay. Down here, we're seeing 20 bushel bumps, probably, maybe 30, if we actually add the nitrogen versus just rely on scavenging and other nitrogen credits. Our protein is better, and I guess I'm speaking of wheat specifically. But yeah, we have more, but again, I'm not in Canada, so I don't even know what your yields would look like up there and what qualities you can hit on your specific crops.
I would just add in working with growers that when we're setting up a fertility plan for any crop, but small grains in particular, you need to look at your cash flow. You need to look at your market potential. If I don't make quality, if I don't make protein, what is the value of this crop going to become? So, you know, if I'm going to take a wheat crop from a 11, 12, $13 value down to $5, $6, $7, you know, what's my lost potential income by not fertilizing this crop? So there's a lot of factors that come into putting a good fertility program together, and economics is one of those.
All right, I think we hit all the questions. We ran a little over, but I think this was a really great discussion, especially considering it was our first time. I think everyone did well, and want to thank everyone who showed up here. We had a great time, and I hope you did too. And we're hoping to do more of these in the future. So please kind of stay tuned here. For everyone here at CFS, thank you very much. And if you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, please don't hesitate to give us a call or stop in if you'd like to do that too. We are going to put this recording up on our YouTube page. So just kind of look for that in the next week if you missed a little bit. And other than that, I think that's it. So everyone have a great night and have a great growing season.
Thanks.
Have a good night.